Thank you, Heather and Ava. That was maybe the best introduction ever. And guess what? I've got a job for you guys in about 14 or 15 years. You know, it is a huge honor to be here today. When the Business Forum, Wahine Business Forum, asked me to come from the mainland, from Omaha, Nebraska, they said, you'll be giving 5 different presentations in about 30 hours. And I was like, what? 5 different presentations? I've never done that before. And as I began to study the agenda, I looked at it and I went, this one's going to be my absolute favorite. So I'm glad I got to go first with you guys before I get into all the other ones. But the reason that you guys are one of my favorites is I studied to be a high school business teacher. So when I think about what it means, and my daughter is a 2nd grade elementary teacher, so I love everything about education and everything about schools. And of course, just coming off of writing a women's report, I love absolutely everything about education. I mean, about women and education. Speaking of, I was just having a wonderful chance to talk to Wahine, your head of school, as well as Pat. And I learned a couple things. So in sitting there talking with Wahine for 30 minutes, you are all so fortunate. And I'm sure you've heard that several times in terms of your parents helping guide you to get you into this school. It's absolutely incredible. And it's such a rare school. You guys, this is very cool and a unique thing anywhere in the world. So congratulations. But one of the things that Pat told me, he said he has 6 clients. And he said, by far, you guys are his favorite. Also went on to say, and I knew that Wahine was a volleyball player at the University of Hawaii, but what I didn't know, and this is a connection back to Nebraska, that she won the last national championship for the University of Hawaii, can I say in 1987? So the reason I say that is because I went to the last volleyball national championship in Omaha, Nebraska last December, and the Huskers are currently the #1 volleyball team in the country. So we're excited about that. So congratulations. Come back to Nebraska. So what I want to do today, I wrote a different speech. I wrote a speech that hopefully resonates with 6th through 12th graders in terms of where you're going. Because you have an absolutely incredible future in front of you. And so one of the things that I wanted to start out with is, many people keep saying to me, have you been to Hawaii before? And I said, yes, this is my 10th visit ever, mostly to Maui and Kauai, and it's always been vacation until now. This is the best kind of work there could possibly be, by the way. But what I thought about was, the first time I was in Honolulu and the last time I was in Honolulu, I was your age. I was in 5th grade, going on 11, 10 going on 11, and the last time I was here, I was 18. And so when I think about time travel and almost a time warp, as I walked down Waikiki yesterday and today, I kept seeing so much of what Honolulu was 36 years ago and 44 years ago. And I thought about, did I ever know back then, when I was a 5th grader or when I was a senior, what it would be like to be 54 and come back? And so one of the things I want to challenge you all today is to think about, where do you want to be when you're 54? Where do you want to be when you're 60? Where do you want to be when you're 70? But maybe we should just start with, where do you want to be when you're 20 or 25, for starters. But one of the things is that we just did a report on the millennials, and the generation in front of you is literally changing the world. And so I started to see if there's any research on your generation. Right now they're calling you Generation Z, and there's very little out there yet, because of course everyone's beginning to just study you as you go through school. Once you enter the workforce, they'll begin to see some differences in terms of what you want out of work. But of course, the thing that we're all seeing is you're even more technologically savvy than the millennials. And so one of the things I've said to my workforce is, as we study millennials and what you guys are all going to be, is that, the way you learn is so different than the way anyone before you ever learned. My daughter, who's the 2nd grade teacher, says that she's using apps all the time to communicate with the parents, to give recognition. I'm sure you probably do things like this. It was foreign to me. But one of the things workplaces are grappling with is, how can they keep up with the technology that you all have been so used to, so that when you get to the workforce isn't boring, because they want to be able to keep up with everything you want to learn and everything you want to be able to achieve. Speaking of achievement, I understand that that's one of the most important values as a part of La Pietra. And one of the things we're also going to talk about briefly in the next 10 to 20 minutes is your strengths. Because some of you are going to be natural achievers, and some of you may be natural competitors. Some of you may be more natural at learning or intellect or strategy. And one of the things when you walk out today, I brought you, had them all sent over, each a book called StrengthsQuest. For those of you in 6th and 7th, you might want to wait a couple years before you take it. You could try it right now because you're all very advanced. It's perfectly meant for about 10th grade through college. We've had over 15 million take the strengths assessment to better understand who they are. So we hope that you'll take this with our gratitude and our excitement for what your future is. So as we talk about strengths, I want to take just a few minutes and read you my favorite parable about strengths as it relates to animals, because most of us probably love animals. So this is called Let the Rabbits Run, and it comes actually from the book of Soar With Your Strengths, which was the predecessor to StrengthsQuest, if you want to go back in time to the early 80s. Actually, I think it was the 90s, actually. Okay, imagine there is a meadow. In that meadow, there is a duck, a fish, an eagle, an owl, a squirrel, and a rabbit. They decide they want to have a school so they can be smart, just like people. With the help of some grown-up animals, they come up with a curriculum they believe will make a well-rounded animal. Running, swimming, tree climbing, jumping, and flying. On the first day of school, little Brer Rabbit combed his ears and he went hopping off to his running class. There, he was a star. He ran to the top of the hill and back as fast as he could go. And oh, did it feel good. He said to himself, I can't believe it. At school, I get to do what I do best. The instructor said, Rabbit, you really have talent for running. You have great muscles in your rear legs, and with some training, you will be able to get more out of every hop. The rabbit said, I love school. I get to do what I like, and I get to learn to do it better. The next class was swimming. When the rabbit smelled the chlorine, he said, Wait, rabbits don't like to swim. The instructor said, well, you may not like it now, but 5 years from now, you'll know it was good for you. In the tree climbing class, the tree trunk was set at a 30-degree angle, so all the animals had a chance to succeed. The little rabbit tried so hard, but he hurt his leg. In jumping class, the rabbit got along just fine. In flying class, he had a problem. So the teacher gave him a psychological test and discovered he belonged in remedial flying. In remedial flying class, the rabbit had to practice jumping off a cliff. They told him if he'd just work hard enough, he could succeed. The next morning, he went on to swimming class, and the instructor said, today we jump in the water. Wait, I talked to my parents about swimming. They didn't learn to swim. We don't like to get wet. I'd like to drop this course. The instructor said, you can't drop it. The drop in ed period is over. At this point, you have a choice. Either jump in or you flunk. The rabbit jumped in, and he panicked. He went down once. He went down twice. Bubbles came up. And the instructor saw he was drowning and pulled him out. The other animals had never seen anything quite as funny as this wet rabbit who looked more like a rat without a tail. So they chirped and jumped and barked and laughed at the rabbit. The rabbit was more humiliated than he'd ever been in his life. He wanted desperately to get out of class that day. He was so glad when it was over. He thought he would have to head home, but his parents would understand and help him. When he arrived, he said to his parents, I don't like school. I just want to be free. If the rabbits are going to get ahead, you have to get a diploma, replied his parents. The rabbit said, I don't want a diploma. The parents said, you're going to get a diploma, whether you want one or not. They argued, and finally the parents made the rabbit go to bed. In the morning, the rabbit headed off to school with a slow hop. Then he remembered that the principal had said that anytime he had a problem, to remember, the counselor's door is always open. When he arrived at school, he hopped up in the chair by the counselor and said, I don't like school. And the rabbit did. The counselor said, Rabbit, I hear you. I hear you saying you don't like school because you don't like swimming. I think I've diagnosed that correctly. Rabbit, I tell you what we'll do. You're doing just fine in running. I don't know why you need to work on running. What you need to work on is swimming. I'll arrange it so you don't have to go to running anymore, and you can have 2 periods of swimming. When the rabbit heard that, he just threw up. As the rabbit hopped out of the counselor's office, he looked up and saw his old friend, the wise owl, who cocked his head and said, Brer Rabbit, life doesn't have to be that way. We could have schools and businesses where people are allowed to concentrate on what they do well. Brer Rabbit was inspired. He thought when he graduated he would start a business where the rabbits would do nothing but run, the squirrels could just climb trees, and the fish could just swim. As he disappeared into the meadow, he sighed softly to himself and said, "Oh, what a great place that would be." The moral of the story is there's such an obsession within the world to fix what's wrong. And one of the things I'm most proud about at Gallup is one of our founders had said, what if we studied what is right with people instead of what is wrong with people? And again, you are such a fortunate group because you've had the ability academically to study all the things that you are well at and to have parents and have teachers who support you in finding strategies to deal with not only your strengths but your non-weaknesses. So you're in a very fortunate situation. But so much of the world, as we were just talking about earlier, the graduation rate in the US is the highest it's ever been for high school graduates, and yet the lowest amount of admissions into college that we've seen in years as a percent of the high school graduating rate. Because not enough kids are finding a way, in public schools in particular, to find ways to have their strengths utilized so that they can be productive citizens within the United States and around the world. Albert Einstein also reinforced something very similar to this parable. He said, everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life thinking that it's stupid. So our goal is to think about what each of you do well as you think about your future. And I wrote just a few points to help you think about what that future might be and how you continue to utilize all those wonderful strengths that you each have. As Ava and Heather said, as they were doing the cute little skit and dialogue, one of the things we found is that 54% of women with children under the age of 18 prefer to stay home with their children. And 40% of women with children under the age of 18 prefer to work outside the home. Now, for many, that's a very shocking statistic. But the reason I want you to think about that is because I want you to think about what that means to your future of work. And as I said earlier, your generation is going to change it significantly. So think about whether you're going to be potentially a stay-at-home mom. And I used to ask my daughter this all the time growing up, and she consistently kept saying, I'm going to work outside the home, I'm going to work outside the home. But she hasn't had children yet. And once you hold those children, you may see a very different world to the type of work you want. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about with executives today, in how businesses can change to be more welcoming, more open, and more flexible to allow and keep more women in the workplace, to allow more women to rise to executive levels. So with that, here's some things to think about. When you think about all the things you get to do in school, what are your favorites? I heard that there's some good, some excellent theater classes, art classes, drama classes. So for those of you who love that, keep pursuing it. For those of you who love math and science, we need more women desperately in math and science. So if you love it and if you can do it well, keep going. For those of you who have a love for teaching and nurturing, nursing and teaching are still very coveted careers. Women are still going into both of those industries in significant numbers. So keep thinking about those school activities you like best and how those potentially transfer to a job. The other thing, and maybe this is not conventional wisdom within your school, I'm not sure, but have jobs, have paid jobs by the time you're in high school, and for sure by the time you're in college. It's one of the best experiences above and beyond volunteering. And of course, volunteer in as many organizations as you possibly can so that you can get a feel for what the different types of jobs there are, and so that you can model and mentor, or so that you can be mentored and see many models. And just like Mahina, be on as many sports teams as you possibly can. And if you're good at sports, keep going. So many young women fall off by the time they're 13. And Mahina is very fortunate for her generation because Title IX didn't come into play until the 1970s, and so many of us didn't do the sports route. And yet today, there are over 3 million women in sports, and it's such an important part of teamwork, competition, and leadership. Again, think about what industries you're drawn to, because manufacturing, engineering, anything STEM and science has the least amount of women. I heard that USC took a class of 40% women engineers, and it's the largest in the country. But only 20% women go into engineering or any kind of computer science. So you can basically write your own ticket if you choose any of those. The other message that I want to get across, and it may not be for you all as much as your siblings, your friends, your cousins, maybe those who aren't in the room here, but all jobs are important. And one of the things I think we're going to see in the future is, I sat next to a man on an airplane whose daughter is a butcher, and he's an academician, and he was so proud of her as a butcher. And yet he was a little embarrassed to tell me, and I kept probing him, and he said she loves it. She loves every aspect of it, and she gets to manage it for a high-profile grocery store and meet the customers. So be respectful and show gratitude for every possible position. The president of Ritz-Carlton was telling a story about how he had a beautiful calligraphy done for an event, and he said we must have paid thousands for that. And they said, well, we actually learned that it was the janitor who had perfect calligraphy, and no one knew. And now it's an additional job he can have. So keep thinking about all the varieties of jobs that are out there and how you can be supportive and appreciative of them. Then the other thing that I would challenge you to look for is, depending upon what industry you go to, sometimes your boss will be more important, and sometimes the actual job at hand will be more important. But you have to have a good manager. You have to have a manager who's a coach. They will hold you into the job longer than anything. The other things we started with is, what do you want to do when you're an old lady? Look at your moms, look at your grandmas, and think about, what do you want to be at 70 or 80? Because it's going to make a significant difference in when you have kids, how much you choose to work, and what you want to do relative to marriage or not. The millennials are getting married later than ever. They're delaying childbirth later than ever. Many say that will be very interesting to study as it relates to everything, fertility and reproductive health, and what that means to future generations. So be thinking about where you want to go relative to kids and marriage at a very young age, so you can think about those values and what matters to you. And then, do you want to live here? Do you want to move to the mainland? Do you want to move to Asia? Do you want to move to Europe? Think about your level of adventure. My daughter traveled the world, and she said, I want to stay right here in Nebraska. I don't want to leave. So we all have different values relative to that level of adventure as well. And one of the things that's most important in a job is that hard work will always pay off. Whether it's intensity in the amount of time that you're able to be at the office, or whether it's going back online after your kids fall asleep, but hard work will make a significant difference to where you go. You have to question yourself how important money is. Is money a motivator for you, or is money just something on the side? Because that makes a significant difference to what career you choose. And then when you think about your strengths, can you do something no one else can do? If you can, play it up. It develops a level of self-efficacy and self-assurance that helps you build confidence for the future. Then think about, do you want to work for yourself, or do you want to work for someone else? Do you want to be an entrepreneur, or do you want to work in a small company, a mid-sized company, or a large company? Because I don't think we talk about that enough, but those three types are very different. And for-profits are very different than nonprofits. So get to know businesses as the type they are and industries, so you can make a great decision. As we talked about, your generation will see things that no other generation has ever seen before, because you are so technologically savvy, and the world is changing at warp speed. Then maybe one of my favorites, tonight I'm going to meet a friend from 5th grade. She's a flight attendant with United, and she happens to be in Honolulu at the same time. But keep your friends. Everybody sitting around you right now, think about where you will be when you're 30, 40, 50, 60, and you're old ladies, maybe with kids, without kids, wherever you are, and how you meet up again in Honolulu or anywhere around the world. I had the chance to meet a cousin in London, but you're so fortunate between Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, stay in touch for decades. Have lots of guy friends. In a private girls' school, that's not going to happen every single day, but make sure you have good guy friends who are just that, friends. They teach you so much about a guy's perspective as it relates to when you will work with them someday. And find people you admire and study them through research, through classes, and find girls you admire in this room that are 1 year older, 3 years older, 5 years older, and see what you admire about them and learn more about them so you can be more like those girls. And keep looking to the future and set goals. Whether you set goals on your birthday, whether you set goals on Christmas, whether it's New Year's Eve, think about what you want by that next holiday. And last but not least, give more recognition than you think is possible. One of the things that my dad used to say was, everybody has an imaginary bucket, and the only way you can fill that bucket is by filling other people's buckets. And so in order to have that self-efficacy, that self-esteem, and that confidence, it really comes from helping others develop their potential. So whether you're a manager, whether you're a physician, whether you're an accountant, whether you're a scientist, How do you bring others along? Through mentoring, through development, but through kindness and through recognition. You know, when I think about Facebook, and I know it's turned into the moms and grandmas place, you guys probably aren't on it much anymore, but it is some of the best form of recognition there is for people's life well lived, for what people do every single day with their families, their kids, their friends. It's a great way to say, I appreciate you, and I appreciate everything you're doing on a daily basis. So when you think about what you can do for your future as well, think about how you can recognize people on a daily basis, teachers, friends, and keep that going every single day. And if you feel down on any single day, or you feel a little bit depressed, one of the best things you can do is sit down and write congratulatory notes, recognition notes, thank you notes, and any kind of gratitude. So with that, I would like to pause and just open up for question and answer. Anything informal, anything goes. We can talk about anything. Yes?
How old were you when you got your first job?
That's a great question. I had my own side business when I was 7 to 10. But my actual first paid job, I was a newspaper girl at the age of 12, and I delivered newspapers very early in the morning. Yes?
When I think of Gallup, I think of polls and surveys and statistics. What's your opinion on statistics in general?
Okay, well that's a great question. As a matter of fact, Pat, we're here to talk about the election, right? Well, I was going to say in my introduction, this is the first year in 80 years we are not doing the proverbial horse race. And what that means is we are still a public opinion pollster. That's a significant portion of our business. But we are not asking the proverbial question, if the election were held today, who would you vote for? We chose to discontinue that 3 years ago after the last election for several reasons. It's a very risky question, and we can get it right, but it costs millions, and we don't want to be paid by anyone to get that question right. And so we chose to stay away and ask everything else. So for example, we asked about leadership styles and the importance of, at the time it was actually Bernie, Hillary, Ted Cruz, and Trump. And what we really found is that it's a very different candidate who can make it through the election process than who may be best to run the country. So in other words, what Americans want is a person that is less likely to make it through this process, because I would contend there's hundreds or thousands of leaders in this country who could be president of the United States right now, but they want nothing to do with that election process. So what you get is you get very courageous people, and you get people with huge conviction. Conviction is very important, but you get people who can make it through the fight versus those who are more likely to run the country. If you can't tell, I'm struggling between both. So that may sound crazy coming from Obama's home state, but I come from one of the bluest congressional districts in the country and one of the reddest states in the country. So it's a little bit of a conundrum, especially being a pollster. Yeah. I'm sorry, how long did I what? That's a wonderful question. Because we were a small company at the time, I did 6 formal weeks off, which of course today we're trying to do everything we can to help move people more towards 10 and 12 weeks. But then I worked part-time for 6 months before I came back. So one of the things we have an on-site child development center for children from 6 weeks, and at that time it was up until 10 years of age because you could go to after-school care. So I don't think I would have stayed in my job had it not been for that child development center. And so I know that that's also one of the most important factors that can keep people in, as well as I had a tremendous manager who worked with me on my scheduling. I was 30 at the time, and she did a beautiful job of helping me know it was okay. One of the controversies, I'll talk fast on this, we just released this morning on Gallup.com, is perception or reality, why men are paid more. And as we know, women are paid 80 cents on the dollar. Everything says it. But we keep trying to get to why. And Lean In and some of the other organizations will say it's because women aren't assertive or aggressive enough. Well, if you go back to strengths, not all of us are going to be assertive and aggressive. It's really incumbent upon the organizations to create that change. And what we're finding is that men are working at least 10% more on average than women. Now, they're claiming and reporting to work more. Sorry guys, hang with me. So what that means is until there's a true measure to what that performance, that contribution, and that outcome is, if it's just measured on time or the perception of time, because women may be more efficient. So where I'm going with that is, I used to go in at 8 in the morning, I wouldn't take lunch, and I would leave at 5 because I had to be at the daycare, so I wouldn't get a daycare fine. Well, men don't have that same need or same mentality. Some do, absolutely. Some are sharing their responsibilities and some do, but statistically, men do not have the same amount of at-home or childcare responsibilities. So they may stay at the office till 7. They may stay at the office till 8. They may be able to go to dinners that women aren't able to go to, unless women can arrange their schedule with their spouse, husband, mom, sister, or daycare provider. So what we're finding is men are able to put in more hours at the office. Whether it's netting more is the question that every organization needs to figure out for themselves, relative to what that means as to why men are paid more. So one of my goals is how do we help companies find ways women can be paid equally for what the contribution is relative to the output of whatever that job is. So that was it was a part of the report, but it launched as a separate article today. Any other questions? Yes.
So you had your daughter in daycare. Did you ever have a nanny to pick her up or anything like that, or did you always pick her up?
Yeah, and she's our nanny stayed, one of our very best friends. And when my daughter moved away, our nanny was still at her wedding this summer. And she was there for every day from 5th grade on, and picked her up from school until she was in, I think, 9th or 10th is probably when, and it wasn't, by the time obviously you're 9th and 10th, you don't need a nanny. It's about making sure that there's that guidance. She had after school activities she needed to get to and some of those types of things until she was able to drive, because in Nebraska and where we live, she was able to start having a school permit by 15. So yes, and she was a woman we love and trust, and has been a great part of our life. Anything else? Well, as JFK said, to those whom much is given, much is expected. And I'm sure that you all will have an absolutely tremendous life because you've been given the opportunity to be at Pietra. And it sounds like it's one of the most fabulous schools, not only in this country, but in this world. As a matter of fact, I wrote my 2 sisters who have a foundation. It's not even to it. And I said, this is something the 3 of us could do together someday, back home in Nebraska, or somewhere in the United States, because you guys are a model for so many schools to have class size like this, and to have selection, have the relationships you do with the teachers, your parents. So congratulations. Make it a great life and a life well lived, and think about what you want at 80, 90, and 100, because your generation will be one of the longest living generations ever. Thank you very much, and congratulations.
We also thank you for the great takeaways and for the wonderful compliment. Thank you very much. Ladies, I don't know if you caught it earlier, but each of you will leave here with StrengthsQuest, which was donated by Mrs. Miller and her company. So we thank you very much for that.